Revenge films.
My name is Henry Williams. I'm 30 years old, and I work full-time at the headquarters for a car manufacturer. I live together with my wife, Rachel. Rachel and I first met at work when she started working for the same company. When we got married, Rachel resigned from the company to become a full-time housewife. Currently, she's supporting me from home. My wife had always had a free-spirited personality. Even after we got married, she had no hesitation to spend the money that I earned at work to buy whatever she wanted when she went out shopping, go on vacations, or to go out for meals and drinks with her friends. This happened pretty frequently. There were times that I was a little bit frustrated with my wife spending money recklessly while I was hard at work, but she was 5 years younger than me, and there was a part of me that couldn't help but to spoil her. Then one day, I was called into the office by the CEO. He said that they were going to be doing an exhibition on our newest car, and the CEO directly put me in charge of this project. I knew that this was a huge opportunity that had a promotion on the line, so I was really motivated, and I put a lot of effort into the materials I made. Because of that, I was working extra hard and working overtime every day. I wouldn't get home until late at night, and by the time I got home, I was exhausted. However, my wife didn't seem to take notice of that. Instead, she was also staying out until late, going out drinking with her friends. Even when I would get home, there wouldn't be dinner prepared for me. I was left with no choice but to eat the cup noodles that we had stocked up in the cabinets, and little by little, I started questioning what marriage was and what my wife was doing. As this continued, I came home one day after finishing another long day of work, working overtime as usual. But then, even later than I got home, my wife came stumbling through the door, and she was drunk. I told her that I've been so busy with work that I don't even have time to go out to eat at restaurants, and if possible, I wanted her to help with making dinner at home. But then, my wife snapped at me and said,
"Oh, please, Henry, you're an adult. You should be able to do that on your own."
And then she immediately fell sideways on the couch and went to sleep. The house was a mess. She wasn't doing anything around the house, and yet my wife was just going out drinking every night. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I was going to fall out of love with her. However, at that time, I had my hands full with work. My mind was only focused on the upcoming exhibition, so I didn't have the time or capacity to be worried about my wife. The day of the exhibition was quickly approaching. One day we were having a company meeting until late at night. The vice president who was attending the meeting turned to me and said arrogantly, "Looks like you're pretty desperate to get that promotion. Is that how badly you want the CEO to like you? Are you trying to become the new little favorite?" I could tell that he was trying to harass me, but I knew that the vice president was the type to say things like this to anybody, and it was a daily occurrence for him to be harassing the employees. So all of us in the company didn't like him. Because of that, I thought it was pointless for me to try to deal with him, so I was going to let it go. But then he continued. "I heard that you were working overtime pretty late again yesterday, too. Why can't you work a little bit more efficiently? Are you that incompetent?" It was true that yesterday I headed home late, but I had actually left the office at normal working hours. After leaving the office, I'd gone out for a drink with the CEO, and we had been discussing the exhibition over a couple of beers. But because I left the office on time, I thought it was suspicious that the vice president knew that I got home late yesterday. And that was when I remembered a certain rumor that I had heard in the past. And that was that before my wife and I got married, there was a rumor going around the company that the vice president was having an affair and Rachel was his mistress. I once confronted Rachel about this, but her response was,
Oh yeah, he's been pretty persistent with me in the past, but of course I said no and rejected him. I mean, he's married anyway.
That's what she said to me, but at that time I did feel like something about the way that she answered me was unnatural. To be honest, it had always bothered me deep down inside. But the fact that I got home late yesterday, my wife should have been the only person to know that because I left the office on time. I didn't want to think this, but the thought instantly crossed my mind that maybe the vice president and my wife were still connected in some way. However, for me to have that suspicion over one small comment was stupid, so I decided to keep an eye on it, but not take any action immediately. I needed to focus on the exhibition that was coming up in a few days, and my work was reaching its peak of busyness. And right at that time, as soon as I got home from work one day, my wife said to me,
Hey, Henry, I'm gonna use the car the day after tomorrow, so can you go to work on the train the day after tomorrow? Thanks.
She asked me this, but the day after tomorrow was actually the day of the exhibition. I was gonna have to leave the house early and start preparing first thing in the morning, so I told her that I couldn't let her borrow our only car. That wasn't the answer she wanted to hear.
Oh, come on, why not? I already made plans and promised that we could take my car to go on a drive. It's already been confirmed.
No matter how many times I tried to explain to her how important it was, she wouldn't back down. In the end, I felt like I had no choice but to let her borrow the car. And on the day of the exhibition, I left the house even earlier in the morning and took the first train. After weeks of hard work, it was finally the day of the exhibition. I was waiting for the train on the station platform, and I noticed that I had left some important paperwork in my car that I absolutely needed that day. Without that paperwork, the exhibition wasn't going to be able to proceed, so I had no choice but to rush back home as quickly as possible. I was running and got to the front of my house, and just as I was heading over to the car was still there in the garage, but it wasn't just my paperwork that was in there. Inside of the car, I saw my wife and the vice president embracing each other in their arms. And then I saw the two of them start kissing passionately, and then they were on top of each other. I immediately hid myself, and I pulled out my cell phone and started taking photos and videos of what I could get. Inside of the car, the two of them were completely naked, and it was nothing short of disgusting. After finishing the deed in a short 5 minutes, the two of them looked fully satisfied with themselves as they started putting their clothes back on. I knew they couldn't see me, but I was so shocked that I froze on the spot. And then, without noticing my presence at all, I heard the car engine start up, and they drove right out of the garage. I grabbed my phone again and tried to call my wife, but I couldn't get through to her. But to me, the shock of seeing my wife and the vice president together wasn't the most important thing to me at that moment. I needed to get that paperwork that was in the car, and so I immediately called the CEO next. I explained the entire situation to him without sparing any details. The CEO was furious at the vice president for laying his hands on an employee's wife and for having the affair during work hours, no less. He said to me, "You can leave the paperwork to me. Just get yourself to the office as soon as possible." And then he hung up the phone. When I arrived at the office, the CEO was outside waiting for me. He had his cell phone in one hand. I then showed the CEO the photos and videos that I had taken just a few minutes ago, And the CEO let out a big sigh like he had seen enough. And then he said, "I'm going to call the vice president myself, and I'll take care of this." And he put his cell phone up to his ear. The vice president must have recognized that he was getting a phone call from the CEO's personal cell phone, so he picked up, and he sounded surprised as he answered the phone. Immediately, the CEO started yelling over the phone. "You idiot! I've already heard everything from Henry! How dare you lay your hands on one of our employees' wives? What on earth are you thinking?" When he said that, I could hear the vice president on the other end of the phone stammering. "What are you talking about, sir?" And he was trying to play dumb, but the CEO was having none of it and demanded over the phone, "I don't need to hear your excuses. More importantly, you better turn the car around and immediately head towards the exhibition venue. Without the material that's in that car right now, we're not going to be able to proceed with the exhibition today. And you know how much is on the line here?" The vice president was silent on the other end of the phone, so the CEO continued. "And you're with Henry's wife right now, aren't you? If you bring her here with you and you apologize to Henry, then maybe I'll show you some mercy and spare you from being fired." I could hear the vice president start panicking. "Oh, please, anything but getting fired. Please don't fire me. I will do exactly as you say immediately, sir." And then the CEO hung up the phone. We headed towards the venue and we waited there for about 30 minutes. Then we saw my car pull up into the parking lot with my wife and the vice president inside. As soon as they got out of the car, the vice president got down on his knees in front of me to apologize. And my wife looked really awkward as she kept glancing over at me. The CEO spoke first. "The lecture will come later. Anyway, right now, the material is what's important." I ran over to the car and I got out the paperwork and headed back towards the venue. But before I went inside, there was one thing that I needed to say to my wife. So I turned around and said, "We're getting a divorce." Those were the only words, and the CEO and I returned to the exhibition venue. I could hear my wife behind me start panicking.
Did you just say divorce? What? But why?
She was flustered and crying out to me, but I completely ignored her, and I went straight back to work. For a while there, I didn't know what was going to happen with the exhibition. But thankfully, the exhibition ended without any further problems. The CEO seemed very pleased, and he even complimented my work. We had worked so hard for that day, and thanks to it being a huge success, the employees and I all went out for drinks afterwards to celebrate. When I got home that evening, even though it was already late at night, Rachel was sitting in the living room waiting for me.
You were joking about the divorce, right?
But I replied, "The moment I saw you with the vice president in my car, I decided that we would be getting a divorce." And I told her that I wasn't going to budge.
No, it's not what it looks like. He was so persistent that I couldn't say no.
She was trying to make excuses, but I told her that I had been frustrated with her for a long time for leaving all of the chores and going out with my money all the time.
Then I'm going to do the chores from now on, and I'll make you dinner, so please don't divorce me.
She was crying, but I ignored her, and I was so exhausted that I went straight to bed and slept alone. The next day, I had the day off of work, so I went to go get the divorce papers and then drove myself to her parents' house. I told them that I was getting a divorce because Rachel cheated on me and asked them to take Rachel back to their house immediately. I brought my in-laws back home with me, and I gave Rachel the divorce papers. But then...
I'm not going to accept this. I want to be a full-time housewife forever.
When her parents heard that... "Do you have any idea what you've done? Even though you have a husband, you had an affair!" They started lecturing her on the spot. They made her apologize to me and then demanded, "Anyway, you better sign those divorce papers, and we're leaving here right now!" She finally signed the papers, and her father grabbed her by the collar and dragged her out. After that, the CEO introduced me to a lawyer, and I collected a settlement fee from both the vice president and my ex-wife. The vice president was given a salary deduction, and he was relegated to an office in the suburbs. And since his family found out about the affair, they all left him, and when he started at the new office, he made multiple mistakes, and in the end, he was fired. As for my ex-wife, after paying me the settlement fee, I heard she was kicked out by her parents, and these days she's desperately looking for a guy to support her. However, nobody wanted to be with a divorcee that didn't have a penny to her name, and I heard that eventually her appearance started to crumble and she ended up homeless. But I have to say, she did this to herself. As for me, because the exhibition was a success, I was able to get a promotion, and I actually took the seat of vice president. I was hurt by the betrayal of my wife, but thanks to my success at work, I was able to recover quickly. From now on, I'm gonna focus on my work, and I'd like to think positively about getting remarried someday.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.